Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Walk and Talk with Warden Jeff. I wanted to tell you a little story this morning about the first time that Mace was introduced to the correctional facilities. It was in the 1990s whenever our facility was finally approved for lieutenants and above to carry Mace. Well, at the time I was a lieutenant, and all the lieutenants got their own personal can of Mace to take home with them and you know, to use their facility. And all of us lieutenants, you know, we were all got along pretty good. It was a pretty good core of lieutenants. There was like 7 of us. And of course, one of them started the pool. Who was going to use the Mace first? A lot of them had their money on me. A lot of them had their money on a couple others. And we were just kind of joking around of it and roll call about it, who was going to use that Mace first. The officers are going, oh no, we hate that. But let me tell you how you get approved for Mace. First of all, you go through a little class, a little hour class that tells you how to disperse it, how to use it and all that. But then you also, as a user of Mace, you get sprayed in the face with Mace because they want you to know what it feels like when you mace someone. Well, let me tell you, it's not pleasant. Your eyes burn for many days, or many hours I should say. It seemed like days. Many hours, your eyes burn. Anywhere it touches, it burns. Your hands, your arms, anything. It was really strong. Plus we got the strong stuff because it comes straight out of the factory, straight to us. So it was potent pepper spray. So anyway, we was getting ready to call chow that night. 3 of us lieutenants were working the chow hall. A couple of the lieutenants was working the housing units. Another one was working down segregation. Well, I was calling the chow lines, which meant I was calling them in and when it was time for them to eat, and then you're running the other ones out because they were finished, and getting them back to cell house. So basically I was in charge of traffic control. Well, I was standing there. It was hot, of course, in there. Hot and humid, smelling like old state food, which was a smell all in its own. And this inmate, little young guy, comes in there. He's probably, I don't know, a little wiry guy, probably 6 foot tall, 165, 170 pounds. At the time, that's about what I was. I probably weighed about maybe 180. Came through the line. He stepped in front of a bunch of people to get in front of everybody. I said, hey, what are you doing? He said, I'm hungry. I said, that don't matter. Get to the end of the line. He said, I ain't getting to the end of the line. He said, I wasn't at the end of the line. I said, no, but you tried to cut. You're going to the end of the line now. He said, I ain't going nowhere. I said, yes, you are. You're going to the end of the line, or you're leaving the dining room and you're not eating today. He said, no. He said, you're not going to run me out. He said, I get my meal. I get my state shot, he said. I said, not like that, you're not. Go to the end of the line. Gave him one more direct order. He refused it. I said, give me your ID card. So he handed me his ID card, and he acted like he was going to hang on to it, and I pulled on it, and he kept it in his hand, looking at it. I said, what, you can't get it out of my hand? So I jerked the ID card out of his hand, and I said, okay. I said, follow me back here. When I'm back here, I meant there is a officer section in the back where the officers ate. It was a little officers dining area. Had a 4-foot wall, or 6-foot wall, I guess, that separated the officers from the rest of the inmates there in the dining hall. So they'd have a little bit of privacy, even though you really didn't have much privacy because it was noisy as could be. So I bring this guy back there to the officer's dining area, and we're standing there, and I've got his ID card, and I'm writing his name down. And I told him, I said, you're going back to cell house, or you're going to segregation. I said, we'll feed you down there in segregation. He said, you're not taking me nowhere. He said, I'm going to get ready to go back to go back and get in line. I said, listen, I said, I've already told you many times that you're not getting back in line unless you get to the end. I said, and that time's over. You're not going to segregation. I'd already had enough. So you can't tell it by looking at me now, but back in the day, in my 30s and even my early 40s, I lifted some weights, and I was quite cut up in some spots, you know, and pretty scrappy back in my day. I didn't shy away from any fighting or anything like that, but I didn't start any. I was just always prepared in case of it happened. Well, this inmate kind of squared up on me. He said, you're not taking me to segregation. Nobody's taking me to segregation. I said, let me tell you, I said, you are really making a huge mistake here. I said, you don't know who you're dealing with. I said, because I'm not playing with you no more. He took another step towards me like he was going to bump my chest. And when he did, I bear hugged him, picked him up, and put him on a table in the officer's section. And the table broke. The whole legs collapsed under us, and I landed on top of him. And another lieutenant was standing there, and he said, Jeff, move your face, move your face, move your face. And my face was about 2 inches from this inmate's face as we're laying on this table on the ground now with our feet up on the table that had broke. And this lieutenant emptied a half a can of mace on this inmate, sprayed him in the eyes, really good shot. And this inmate was screaming bloody murder, but guess who else was screaming bloody murder? That's right, me. I got just as maced as the inmate did. So I was coughing and gagging and trying to get up. The other officers were trying to get me up and get water from my eyes. The inmate started to fight once I got off of him. The inmate was fighting blindly because he couldn't see a thing. Finally, a couple other officers jumped on him, got him handcuffed, and took him to our segregation unit. But this little knucklehead was wanting to fight that day, and that just happens. You know, you'll find a guy who's having a bad day in the cell house, or he's having a bad day at home. His girlfriend broke up with him, or our wife's going to divorce him. There's always something going on with these guys in prison, because you remember they're people too, and they have their problems. It's just that they don't know how to handle their problems, and a lot of times their problems handled through violence. Well, this guy had every intention on fighting me that day. I knew that. I sensed that from the very beginning, from the very first bit of conversation with him, that this guy was wanting to fight. A couple of lieutenants even told me, said, Jeff, this guy said, you might want to just let him go. I said, no, I'm not letting him go. That's not my nature to let him go. He's going to listen to me, or, you know, things are not going to be good. So anyway, the inmate got shipped to a maximum security prison. He got an extra year across the board for the trying to create a disturbance in the chow hall and staff assault, because he actually did punch one of the officers who was trying to get him handcuffed. But anyway, like I've always said before, 90% of your day involves much of nothing. You know, you're just kicking it with the inmates and everything's nice and easy peasy. And then all of a sudden, boom, it happens. And it happens in an instant. So you always got to be ready. Bottom line of the whole story was, I lost. I was not the first one to use the mace. I was the first one to get maced. So anyway, that's my story today. Hope you enjoyed it. Go to my channels. I got a couple of shorties on there too, talking about prison stories. Check them all out, and like, subscribe, and comment on my pages. Have a great day, and I'm out.